so we can have this going. So just a couple of things up at the top of the conversation. I want us to be able to engage because this is going to be a lot of like storytelling and conversation. I do have a couple of slides just so that we can kind of keep things moving, because I know we don't have a lot of time, and I want to make sure there's plenty of time for us to share, but then also to keep kind of a stream going. If everybody would stay muted, and as you are wanting to speak, or we'll just kind of go with the flow. I like this organic idea of like, oh, we all are give and take. If you have something you want to share. And I'm going to go over some protocols and things just that I like to say up front before we begin these conversations, especially ones like this that are delving into things that may be triggering, that I know as a white person, that it can come up, the conversations that we're having. And so I just have a couple of like group agreements that I'd love to share with y'all on the outset. So I'm recording. I think we've got the amount of people that RSVP'd. So as more people come in, I will pull them in, but I think I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get through the just kind of the introduction part of this. So thank y'all for being here. Okay. If you can, I think we can see the screen. I'm feeling festive and merry. So some of y'all may need to put some sunglasses on because now that I see this Canva up and huge, it is bright. So my apologies to those who are like, whoa. All right, so I was playing with like what the title of this is, because if you were here, you probably, or you may not have, I don't know, but we're in the topic where we're talking about community and unschooling. And I had posted about, oh wait, I've got people coming in. Let me make sure I can do that. Okay, I posted about having been a part of creating an SDE community, specifically a Sudbury community, and the way that white supremacy is just so insidious in our society, and how it creeps in even in the most well-intended communities and in the most well-intended models, and how the flexibility that I think we all can connect to as we're creating these communities, especially when we have chosen a model to build the community around. So I wanted to just talk about that. But part of what I have done since we closed our school back in March, and I've had all this time to reflect, because we went into quarantine, and that's part of why we closed. A lot of the things that I reflected on was the fear and scarcity mindset that I think that so much of our existence is really founded upon. I know that in the United States, it's what is rotting the underbelly of our society, and it's coming out in white supremacy. But white supremacy is the fear and scarcity mindset, and they all are kind of interwoven. So I wanted to talk about how we're working in the practices that we, first of all, stories about how we see that come up, kind of like oil coming up out of a really like fresh landscape that we're like, it's not going to be that way because we did all the things, but it just happened. So I want to talk about that, but I also want to talk about micro and macro tools for liberation that we can begin discussing and just paying attention to as we build these SDE communities that I think are just going to continue to ramp up and grow. And maybe if we can come into it knowing or acknowledging that would be huge. And then just hold on one second because I'm getting more people entering and I want to make sure that I get them in. Okay. So first of all, this is the agenda. I don't know if we're going to get to all of it because I know that we're here for such a limited amount of time, but I wanted to at least lay the foundation of it. And if we get wrapped up in a specific part of the conversation, I think that so many of these conversations that we're having are evolving into more conversations moving forward. So I have this agenda here, and we'll get through as much of it as we can with this idea and thought that if it's something that you want to continue talking about, I am here, my Zoom is available, and we can set up more conversations to move further into the realm of re-envisioning the foundations of SDE communities where we face the fear as we're creating it. And I think that's what it really comes down to, owning that white supremacy is gonna loom up at some point because it's part of, we're all swimming in it, no matter where we are on the globe, really. So the first thing we're going to go through is some group agreements that I pulled from my favorite book on facilitation and just everything. You know, I don't want to say that I consider Adrienne Maree Brown like a saint of social justice movements, but I kind of do. So if you're not familiar with Adrienne Maree Brown, go and check her out. Her book, Emergent Strategy. When I discovered it in 2018, right as we were opening up our Sudbury School, and I wish I had had this in 2015 as a tool for facilitating and creating community. It just has some really great stuff in it. And I'm going to pull from her chapter that's Tools for Emergent Strategy Facilitation. And so we'll start with that, and then we'll do some introductions, and y'all tell me why you've decided to be here. And then we will open the floor for stories of how, I need to move my little participant list, white supremacy seeps into the most well-intended situations and communities. So if you have those to share, I think we'll try to keep it to about 5 minutes a person, because I want to get to everybody, but I know there's a lot of us on here. And I also understand that some of you may just be here to listen. And so I want to give everybody the freedom to speak, but also timely, you know, so we all get through it. And then after we do that, I'd love to get to a brief overview of micro and macro practices for healing fear and scarcity mindsets, and this idea of visionary futuring. Some have called it feral futuring. I am really involved in visionary storytelling and idea casting, and with a lens toward honoring that white supremacy is going to come up and how we're going to face it head on and not ignore it or be afraid that it's going to come up, because it's going to come up, right? And we have to learn how to take care of ourselves and be radically self-aware so that when it does come up and we're triggered by it, we can own it and acknowledge it and keep moving toward the vision of what it can look like in these communities when we own it and honor it and acknowledge it. And I'm not saying honor white supremacy, but I think y'all know what I mean. Honor the feelings that come with it and stepping into that. And then where can we go from here within this community? If there's time for us to talk about that, I'd love it. I have a feeling that number 5 is going to be another conversation with another, you know, solid amount of time where we can have some time to process and reflect, write, do some visioning, and then come back together and maybe start working on a framework for these communities, and like almost like a checklist of when this comes up, which it will, what are we going to do? How are we going to connect in an inclusive way with all of our baggage on all of our levels, and stepping into that and owning it and honoring one another. So that's kind of where we are. That's kind of where I am right now. So The first thing that I want to go over is group agreements. And I'd love for us to take a deep breath, because I think what we're about to go into is it can be overwhelming and triggering. And if you are a white person who's trying to have conversations like this with your family, with your friends, I mean, we all know how it just, and you're like, ah. So I think a lot of us are on the same page here, but I also think that in any situation where there's a huge amount of white people, and I actually don't even know if there's a huge amount of white people on here, because I can only see like a few of y'all's faces because I have my thing up. But people that are white identifying, I think that we, especially those of us that are working so hard to not be, and to monitor ourselves when we are called out, or when we find that we may have overlooked something that was entirely based in white supremacy, that is just embedded in us, we can become defensive because we're like, but I'm trying so hard, right? And so I want us to all hold space for one another and hold space for that feeling that we have. And I want us to hold space for those of color who are on here, who are watching a lot of times and are just so frustrated by the fact that we are a lot of times missing the micro in our effort to be this on the macro, like anti-racist, and we're doing all the work. And I just want us to all be able to care for one another, because we all came here for the exact same reason. We all want the same thing. We all want a world, and we want a world for our kids and for our future descendants that is not post-racial, but that is understanding and acknowledgement, so that then we can create systems, recreate systems that hold it and know it, and then we can scaffold in that way. So so I would love for us to close our eyes, because before I go through what's here, I want to read to you something from Emergent Strategy that came from an excerpt from Asians for Black Lives, Principles and Protocols for it was an organizing movement conference that happened. And this were the protocols that this community came up with around these kinds of conversations. So I'm going to read it. If you want to close your eyes and breathe through it, or just take a moment to kind of get into your body, because we're going to be doing a lot of mind, body, spirit. I think this conversation requires a balance of all. So the protocols, how we believe in doing this work: organize our people, strive for a strategic diversity of tactics so all who want can play a role, build trust and practice transparency, move boldly and swiftly, take risks, make mistakes, share lessons, embody self-care and humility, community accountability, collective healing. We submit these principles and protocols with humility and openness. We don't have it all figured out, but we are committed to taking a stand and learning as we go. We will not wait to be perfect, because we believe the time is now, and we would rather be held accountable for our mistakes than forgiven our inaction. And with that, I want to go over just a couple of group agreements. She has a whole list of them, but I picked the ones that I think will be most impactful for the conversation we're having today. And those are here, but if you have any questions, or if you want to pop into chat, if you want more, clarity on it, please do that. And I will be monitoring the chat as well. But listen, so the first one is listen from the inside out, or listen from the bottom up. A feeling in your gut matters. So if you aren't able to talk, because we do want to be respectful of everyone's time, jot it down. And then we have this wonderful mighty networks where we can put these conversations in and we can evolve them. So if you are feeling something or you are hearing something and it triggers you, I promise you that it is something that someone else is going to connect to. So own the feelings in your gut, your intuition, as we're having these conversations. Engage the tension, don't indulge the drama. I think that's self-explanatory. This one is hard for me, and so I put it in here because I have to say it to myself all the time. Wait, why am I talking? The question mark. So as we are making the decision about sharing, I'm not keeping anybody from sharing their stories, but let's consider in these conversations why I am telling the story or why I am speaking in that moment. Make space, take space. There are lots of people. I am the verbose person on calls, and there are those that are reticent and that do not want to speak up, right? But that feel that they need to. And sometimes the verbose, in the moments of silence, when we're like, who would like to go? There is a tension of the verbose people being like, it's too silent. I need to jump in with something to say. That's where the wait comes in. Why am I talking? Am I talking or am I telling the story to fill a void that I think it took too long? Because those that are reticent may be right about to want to click on and say, I want to tell the story. And because there's so many of us on this call, this is not going to be in the round kind of thing where I'm going to get to everybody. So please take that extra beat and kind of go with that why am I talking, and make space and take space connected. Be open to learning. Be open to someone else speaking your truth. Assume the best intent and attend to the impact. So somebody may say something on here and their intention is absolutely pure, but the impact could be problematic or could affect someone else on the call. And that is okay. That's what this conversation is. And that's why we want people to come in to a engage tension, but don't indulge drama, and remember where you are in this. And that what you are seeing, or what you thought was a certain way, from another person's perspective that has a different worldview, it may not. And I know we deal with that all the time in our society nowadays, but we can attend to the impact with the assumption that the person that is saying something that may be super triggering to us is doing so with their best intention, but it doesn't mean that it gets to just stay, right? Like that just gets to sit there. So you can attend to the impact of that. And I will do my best to facilitate as that comes up. And then self-care and community care. I'm going to get you out of here at 1:30, and you go do what you need to do. Turn off your video if you need to, whatever you need to do to get through this. I just am thankful that y'all are here. So, all right, let me move on. I'm going to check my chat real quick. I am recording. Okay. All right. Oh, great, Crystal, thank you. Okay. All right, I'm gonna move my chat here, and I'm gonna bring my participants out of the way, and I'm gonna move to the next introductions. So this is what I'd love to hear from each of you. And because there's so many, if you could take just like less than a minute, if possible, to share your name, where you're located, and what drew you to the conversation today. because there's so many, I want to hear from everybody who wants to talk. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come out of the sharing screen so that I can see everybody. And what I will do is I'll just go in order of who is here at this point. So based on what I see, I'm just going to call your name, and if you will just share. Brooklyn, you are the first person in my little quilt of boxes.
Hello, I'm Brooklyn. I'm on occupied Kalapua land, also known as Eugene, Oregon, and I'm here to listen and perhaps share. We'll see.
Great, thank you. All right, Kat, Petra Cabis. And if I say your name wrong, please correct me. Thank you.
Okay, hi. I am Kat and I live in Montreal in Canada. I was here mostly out of curiosity and I was appreciating the fact that there was a conversation around white supremacy and racism within a space where I don't always see that happening in unschooling communities. So I'm mostly here also to mostly listen and maybe share.
Great, thanks. So Sonia, I'm Sonia, but you may pronounce it differently. So hi.
I'm Sonia. I'm living in Cluj-Napoca in Romania. And I'm here because half of my life I lived in a box. Then I moved to a bubble, then to a bigger bubble. And I need to understand other people's realities and how to be a bit more tolerant because I'm not as I wish. And also I want to learn how to keep my strict boundaries because I tend to be an empath with the oppressor. And I want to be more specific to put my limits, my boundaries, and to keep them and to hold space when it's needed, but to close the space when it's needed.
Thank you. Rebecca.
Hi, I am on Cherokee land, small mountain town in North Carolina, Boone, and just very, very interested in this conversation. I'm just, it's something we've been really focused on and struggling with in the SDE community that I hold here. Of course, personal journey with the family, just, yes, just all of that and the pervasive whiteness. And I'll just say quickly, just our SDE community seems to be a very very white, very perceived liberal leaning people with unexamined whiteness. That's the gestalt of the group. And so just trying to navigate helping to move everyone forward in this community and while I'm doing my personal work.
Thank you. Tay.
Hi, I'm Tay. I'm in Southern California. Been interested in this kind of work for a while and mostly here to listen.
Thanks. Emil. And if I said that wrong, Emil Snyder.
That's right. Emil Snyder. I'm in rural Southern Oregon. I've got kids 13 or almost 14, almost 16. And they've unschooled their whole lives. And as I've spent more time reading and thinking and becoming more uncomfortable with the sense or the way whiteness and other axes of oppression show up in unschooling communities, and so here to listen and think about how I can do better.
Thanks. Sarah.
Sarah. I'm on Ute Arapaho land near Boulder, Colorado. I have an almost 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. Yeah, I'm here out of a conversation that we were having, Sonia and a couple of us. For me, it's like how hard it is for white people to actually be together and like rely on each other in a meaningful way that's not superficial. So I think white supremacy hurts white people too. And I know I fully acknowledge that the intense oppression it has on people of color. And I'm interested in how to build community actually, like where people actually need each other and are together.
Thank you. Alexander.
I am Alexander Coast. I'm on occupied Lenape land, New York City. Part of what brought me here actually was meeting you the other day, Sonia. I really liked engaging with you. But of course, another part of it is doing this work, which is ongoing work that I've been very conscious of and been doing with quite a number of people actually on this call. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you. Eva, tell me which one.
Eva, thank
Eva.
you.
Okay.
I'm in San Jose, California, also Ohlone land. And yeah, like so many others, here to listen and learn what I can. I'm brand new to unschooling, and so I haven't even been in a self-directed learning space of any kind. So I don't have any stories to share specific to those environments. But this is always something I'm working on as a white Jew, which has its own nuances, a weird intersection to be at sometimes. And I will just say, living now in a sort of sprawling suburb after several years living on a campus where we were just surrounded by a huge diversity of people. And my kids got to have that experience, as did I, in their earlier childhood, and now we feel more isolated, similar to what Sarah was mentioning. That's an interest of mine, as well as pitfalls to watch out for and increasing my sensitivity as I look for unschooling community where I am and where I hope to find it.
Thank you. Wendy.
Hi, everybody. My name is Wendy, and I'm from San Leandro, California. It's a suburb in San Francisco, the Bay Area. So I'm here just to learn more because I've realized, or having this awareness of how the whiteness has really influenced my life. And I wanted to, basically just be able to share more with my children on how we can undo all these oppressive things. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
But
you.
I'm here to listen. Thank you.
Thanks. Ruben.
Hi, I'm Ruben. I am on Kickapoo or Potawatomi land, also known as Chicago. And I came to this conversation mostly to listen and just out of the things that I've seen growing up as an unschooler and self-directed learner and the various forms of oppression, mainly racism, but also homophobia and anti-Semitism. And it's unacceptable. So I want to move past that and work with people to create SDE communities that are anti-racist and anti-oppressive systems for all and accessible to all. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Bria.
Hi, I'm Bria. I'm on the territories of Clackamas, Chinook, and Multnomah tribes in so-called Portland, Oregon. I'm here because, kind of like what Ruben said, this is so prevalent in unschooling and SDE communities, and it's very unexamined in a large majority of them, and very examined in some of them. So I just think it's important that we keep having these conversations, keep engaging in this work, keep pushing each other to go deeper. because it's very needed, and I think we're very overdue for it. So I'm here to listen and learn, and I have stories, but I prefer to listen first.
Thank you. Gianna. Okay, Gianna, I have known you online for years, but how do you pronounce your name?
I pronounce it Yana, but all pronunciations are very welcome and I enjoy them. All pronouns are also very welcome.
Okay.
I'm in South Africa, Johannesburg, the first people here with a SAN. I'm here because as a white South African, this is a lifelong journey and it's going to be lifelong and it's always got new layers to it. And I really want to create safety for everybody in our spaces. And I just love that everyone's here together. Thank you.
Thank you. John.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is John. I am also in San Jose, California on a lonely land. And I guess I should preface this by saying that I was not raised in SDE education or an unschooling community. But I've been interested in this topic since high school, interested in self-directed education as a means to, undertake the fight against, racism, capitalism, etc. Because of my belief that the traditional school system encourages these problems. But I've also been very conscious of how in unschooling, in self-directed education, or just under the broader umbrella of progressive education, there's this discomfortable whiteness within it. In my city, there are progressive schools, which, I mean, this isn't the area you're looking for, but even in these, sort of traditional schools that are semi-progressive based, you still notice this unbearable whiteness between them and the majority of inner city schools that are, majority Black, Brown, Asian, etc. And so I guess I'm just trying to learn and listen and, yeah, so I'm glad to be here.
Thanks, John. Okay. Now, those that I'm going to call now are, their videos aren't here, so I'll just give you a couple of seconds, just a little bit. But Crystal, if you would like to share. Hi.
Hello, I'm just playing with the new toy. But I'm Crystal. I'm a facilitator at Gastonia Freedom School. So we are majority Black. So we deal with white supremacy culture in a different way. And I also write and speak and talk about this with other communities. So I'm here to help if I can be helpful.
Yes. Thank you. Nora. Hi.
Hi everyone, my name is Nora. I am currently on Salish land in Missoula, Montana. And yeah, kind of similarly to what a lot of folks have said, I feel like I've noticed this conversation is often like pushed to the side or not engaged in fully in a lot of STE spaces. And it's super vital to examine. So I'm really happy to be like gathered here with all of you. I've also been recently like working through the Developing a Disruptor's Ear workbook, which is about like uprooting schoolishness and white supremacy. So that's a really interesting resource and guide, and I feel like I've been really getting a lot out of that, and really happy to kind of be doing more of that work by gathering with everyone and hearing all of your stories and perspectives. So yeah.
Nora, thank you. And the Disruptors Guide is Akila's work, if I'm correct. And so for those who aren't familiar with it, I highly recommend. It's on her website, Raising Free People. Yeah. Elizabeth.
Hi everyone, I'm Elizabeth and I am also in Montreal or Tiohtià:ke. Yeah, I just have a lot of questions around white supremacy or pervasive whiteness in this unschooling, self-directed education arena and have come up against it a lot of reluctance to engage with it, and yeah, just wanting to find ways forward, and how that happens, I don't know, but that's why I'm here.
Thank you. And I do want to say Malika Diggs also co-wrote that Disruptors book. Bria, you wouldn't mind, oh, look at you. Okay, thank you. Shannon. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Shannon, and I'm on Suquamish and Stillaguamish land in Kenmore, Washington. And yeah, I guess I've noticed the reluctance to engage this topic in an unschooling, mostly white unschooling community that I'm in, and I'm here mostly just to listen and learn.
Thank you. Okay, September, I have you next.
September just posted in the chat.
Oh, she did. Oh, good. September posted in the chat. So did Alicia. And it could be Alicia. So, but both of them are in the chat. So I have Amala.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm interested in this conversation partially because of the posts that, Sonia, you started a post and just a reply. Yeah, it's something I've thought about a lot over time because I was always looking for progressive options, and then those options were white. So I was in the gifted program that was pretty white, and then I tried like an art school, and then I tried alternative school. So I kind of had a lot of education that were, just that wasn't, those weren't really inclusive spaces for me. And then unschooling my daughter, I've also kind of dealt with the same dynamic of being in, like I tried to organize self-directed spaces myself, and there's lots of interesting interpersonal challenges with that. And but basically I've done I sort of switched to doing sort of small, more sort of small scale collaborative things with people who I knew kind of got certain things, and just tried to create spaces that were just smaller and that were more personally supportive for us. And then now my daughter's a bit older, she's 15. So I've started a homeschooling support group for BIPOC homeschoolers in Ontario. So so it's just a Facebook group, and then we have like a weekly Zoom group. But it's interesting for me to kind of see just all the different places that people are coming from, and all the different experiences and all the different challenges. And a lot of people will say things like, well, I belong to a religious community, and that's our kind of like our, that my brown children can be around other brown people and people who have the same background as them. But then but I feel different because that's a very school-minded kind of community. And then I'll be in the unschooling or the homeschooling community, and that's very white. And so I just feel different everywhere. And like, there's no real kind of place where we can, completely feel ourselves or completely belong or whatever. So, yeah.
Thank you. Malika, you just came on, and if you would like to share what we're doing is we're just giving our name, our location, and what drew us here today.
Okay, hi. I'm very new to unschooling. We don't participate in a community, but I do read about different unschooling communities and SDE spaces. I'm reluctant to join them because really part of the reason why going to unschooling spaces or going to unschooling is to try to really remove myself from white supremacy and all the actions that are associated with it. And so I really want to stay within my own area, but that also is very limiting in terms of just even finding people who are interested in self-directed education. So I'm really just kind of here to listen to see what white people are doing about it. That's really what I'm trying to see and see what kind of actions other people are taking in those spaces, and if we do decide to, maybe there is a Sudbury school being created here. And so I've heard about, I'm just here to listen and see kind of what things are being done, can be done, what challenges, and I want to listen on the other side instead of being the one teaching, actually. So that's really why I'm here.
Thank you. I believe that is everyone. Please, if it's not, yell at me right now and tell me to stop. And but I think that it is. So I'm gonna share my screen again, just for the purposes of, because I know we had some new people come in, and I'm not gonna go back over the group agreements, but I did want to share with those who have come in that we went over these group agreements, and I think that it's important for all of us to at least see them. So I'll leave them up here for just a moment for anyone who wants to read through them, while I talk to you about the next part. The next part is, I'm going to leave this up because I'm going to go back off, because now this is story time. This is the stories, and this may take up the rest of the time. We have 45 minutes. I mean, I wanna, if we have a second, to talk about some practices that on what we can do, like how we get started. But I want us to take some time to like talk through our well-intentioned our well-intentioned communities and practices that sometimes go awry because as a white person, that things come up that you think, oh, you did all the things correctly, and something happens and you're like, oh, this is so, like, it's layered, and then you're like, my God, it is so pervasive and layered, and it can feel overwhelming. And I know that for a lot of people, it can feel like you just want to shut it down and be done. And like some people of color have said, I don't want to engage in it because it's the last thing I want to deal with again, right? Like I deal with it all day long, and then here we are, and then I have to be the educator of it, like Malika said. And I want us to be the educators. And I also want to say this before we get into these conversations, if we don't get a chance to talk about it after. In one of the ancestral conversations I was in yesterday, I believe her name is Atabe, but if you can tell me her name, how to pronounce it, I don't want to say it incorrectly. She talked about how we talked about how our ancestors have oppressed, how there's the perpetrators and the victims over centuries, over millennia, right? And one thing that she said that it just was so impactful, and I want us to hold it here, was that our ancestors did this to our ancestors collectively, okay? And we are this bridge generation that is having to like untangle the threads of that, right? And as we engage in these conversations, they are complicated and complex for everybody on all levels. So with that, I am going to stop sharing, and I'm going to open up the floor to you to share some things that may have come up in your experiences in SDE and white supremacy, and how it's affected kind of how you do things and manage this community, the communities we're in.
I could just start. So my child's almost 5 and we're thinking about how to unschool. And my predominant concern is that my kid gets to be around other kids. I also work, anyway, so I visited a Sudbury school yesterday, and this is what took place in a nutshell. It's a white cisgendered man, and he is sitting with me, talking to me about the school. And he asks if I have any concerns. And I said, I am concerned about the inherent racism in the judicial system of the school, and also what happens when mostly white kids are kind of left free, but there's no active kind of interruption of whiteness or bringing attention to the way we perceive things or the way we're represented as white people. And he just looked totally confused. And this white cisgendered man said, we're just colorblind. And I was like, it's 2020, dude. Are you seriously just like, is that really your reply? And then he said, have you looked at our materials? And I was like, yes. And they actually have the TED Talk by Akilah Richards. And he's like, have you listened to the podcast? I was like, I listened to Akilah's podcast, Fair of the Free Child. And he was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I was like, she's on your website. Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about. That's where I'm coming from and what is fearful for me. So much blindness about, Alex, I was at your talk, and yeah, silence equals violence. And unless we, as white people, like actively participate in dismantling the system of white supremacy, we participate in it. And of course, it's layered and ongoing and lifelong, like Gianna just said. But and then when COVID hit, I live in a working class neighborhood, so kids actually play on the street, which is really awesome. And there are some mixed races, it's mostly white. But for me, it was so obvious in COVID that what we need is each other. And I was like, okay, like let's actually create like something here outside of capitalism. It's not like a school we pay for, but just like take care of each other, take care of each other's kids, and like swap. And just nobody was there for it. Everybody really stayed in their lane and in their little home. And I just feel disappointed in how difficult it is for white people to like be there for each other in each other's lives in a real way.
Thank you. I connect deeply to what you're saying around the Sudbury model as the white woman who was the like founder of Nashville Sudbury School. And regardless of what's so complicated about this and why I want to hear from y'all is because we very much went into founding this model. And I was like, from the beginning, I was actually on Akilah's podcast in 2017 being like, hashtag Sudbury is so white. And I don't want to start a school that is just a whole bunch of middle-class white people that are creating laws together that then we start doing outreach and bring in diverse community. And the laws have already been created by a whole bunch of white people, because I chose the Sudbury model because I back then had like this kind of like I'd given up on the United States as a whole and a democratic government. But I was like, well, I think that our country will not sustain itself and we're going to be Mad Max Thunderdome in like my kid's lifetime. So what can I do? I'm unschooling, but I'm also a recovering public and private educator. And I'm also wrapped up in fear about how everything's going down in flames. So what can I do to create a community that we can practice in a micro community, what it's going to look like when we're all nomadic and like living in Mad Max Thunderdome? That is literally the reason why I founded Nashville Sudbury School and founded the Sudbury and wanted to use the Sudbury model, because I was like, well, you know, it's this democratic, and so maybe we can do it one voice, one vote, and we can do it on a micro level. But I was like, but we can't do it on a micro level if we all go in with a whole bunch of white parents, founding it with a whole bunch of white kids who start making the laws on day one, because that's how Sudbury model works. Like, you make laws in community, and we need a cross section of our community, socioeconomically, racially, like all of it. What can we do to make that happen? And so we walked into it founding it that way. I don't know, and I don't know how many of the schools in the United States that are Sudbury that are over 10 years old did that, right? And the model that we got was the Sudbury Valley model, and you like kind of just take it, and it's very clear, like, to be a Sudbury school, these are the things. And so I was like, okay, we can do these things, but we're going to do it on a small scale. And we did. We opened our doors with a cross section of our community, and we had diverse families involved. And I was like, oh, we're going to win. It's going to be great. We've got 20 kids, and 8 of them are of color, all and of all different socioeconomic, and we have we're affordable. And when you begin creating it, and then you begin, the laws are one thing, but when you begin the judiciary committee portion of it, and the JC is it's everything wrong with our society as it is. And so we watched it implode upon itself in our effort to try to stay true to the model. And at an extreme now, I'm kind of like, screw a model. I don't want a model. I want to do something that's completely, like, let's do something that's completely different, because all the models feel to me as if you're gonna, except for, and I'm gonna be quiet, and I love, because Janan, you are a Sudbury school, but you were one of the few people that was using restorative justice, and we're implementing these things and saying screw it to the people like the gentleman that, I mean, I don't think you were saying screw it, but I'm putting words into your mouth, that Sarah came in contact with, and that we can't do it that way. It's too layered, it's too complex. And so I am just craving, I'm craving ideas that step outside of the models that are in place right now, for something completely new and not a model. Does that make sense? I know that sounds crazy, but okay. Yes,
I have a
Brooklyn.
story to share.
Oh, Brooklyn, and then.
Oh, someone else want to go first?
Do you want to address Janan, and then we'll have Brooklyn?
If it's related to what Sonia said.
Yeah, so this is completely 100% related. Is that okay? Yeah. So, I think there's a kind of a white supremacy thing operating in this assumption that the model is the model and you take it like this. You know, I don't really, I'm not in America. I don't really know what your demographic is. I haven't looked at how the numbers fall. But obviously in South Africa, you know, white people are a numerical minority, still political and economic majority, but a numerical minority, and it makes for a different dynamic. So it kind of makes sense to me that, you know, Sudbury is very, very innovative in terms of ageism. But, you know, it was founded back in the 60s where, I don't know, they hadn't really started interrogating the justice system. Whereas when we came, you know, sort of in 2017 to put ourselves together, you know, we'd already been through this whole, you know, apartheid, post-apartheid era, Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So it came naturally to us to interrogate that aspect of the model. And it was just open and shut, you know, not one person in the founders group could imagine having a JC as we saw the JC. Now, none of us got to visit anywhere, so we kind of had to read, we had to talk to, we had to listen, and we had to then construct between ourselves. But here's the interesting thing, and a lot of people have been surprised when I say this. I told Daniel Greenberg exactly what we were doing with our alternative, what we call an access committee rather than a JC, and he was completely thumbs up. There's nothing hard-baked about the JC into the Sudbury model. If you look at what he says about the Sudbury model, it's basically around young people being treated in an egalitarian way, and that the authority must always be by the consent of the governed. So if you actually look at the DNA of the Sudbury, it's very, very amenable to an anti-racist interpretation. It's just that if we come from our own perspectives and our own assumptions, and also this thing of doing what the others are doing and doing what the others have done, rather than co-creating with the people on the ground at a grassroots level to make something that works for all of us, then we are going to end up kind of entrenching what's been done before rather than innovating. So just in defense of the model, but yeah, I think you're also spot on. But again, Daniel Greenberg said, he actually explicitly says, each community must make its own in its own way. It's very, you know, it's similar to, you know, so Reggio Emilia from the progressive system says something similar, that, you know, you can't implement a model in a place and a time. I mean, if you look, Crystal, at your community, is a completely, you know, there's different needs there. You know, having a majority of special needs children, for example, or if, you know, I think there's a Sudbury, I've heard somewhere, that's mainly LGBTQA+. So, you know, each community is going to have to shape its own. And that has to evolve over time as well as people come in. So if you again look at the fact that people are making the rules on day one, yes, but they can also completely throw out and change those rules on day 673. So as long as the focus of the founding group is on building in that collaboration and that flexibility, there's really no reason why any model should be not doable from an anti-racist perspective. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Thank you. Brooklyn, if you would like to go.
I was going to pass it off to Tay if Tay had something.
Oh, to Tay. And I was going to say, Tay raised her hand. Yes.
Yeah, I just, I kind of don't want to like derail primarily probably unschooling conversation into a Sudbury conversation. I went to Sudbury Valley and I worked there for 3 years. And I think something that actually drives those guys nuts is that there's such verbatim copying of the specific thing that they're doing. Now I have all kinds of problems with various people in that specific community that are, you know, that's my own thing. But I think something that's really like hampered the development of Sudbury schools is being so committed to doing it like by the model instead of being like, the first thing is the kids. The first thing's not what Danny says. It's the kids in your community and what they're developing. So, I mean, we've done a bunch of experiments with how to resolve conflict at the school that I've been working at more recently, which is the open school in California. And, you know, having it be more like, okay, you know, somebody feels like they were wronged and they can't address it in just an interpersonal, like regular way. So then they bring it to like a group that figures out what happens, and they do like voluntary like restoration so that the person who's committing a wrong is the one who's deciding how they're going to restore. And we don't use like, you know, guilty and innocent or whatever in terms of that. So I think if you want to do that kind of thing, you should really be free to like fuck around and find out, you know.
Yeah. Thank you, Tay. Ruben, I'm going to let you go, and then we'll bring it to Brooklyn.
Yeah, sure. I just want to push back a little bit. I mean, I know everybody has had different experiences here with Danny. I am best friends with his grandchildren. And I'm just gonna say Danny and Hannah Greenberg, and I don't know about Mimsy, are racist, in my opinion. I think they're racist. I think the model, people are way too like, they hold it above all these things and they're like, oh, we look up to the model, whatever. You know, and I've had beautiful experiences at Sudbury, and not even saying that Danny and Hannah are horrible people. They're not, but like, you have to understand like where they're coming from. They're, you know, they're very neurotic. They have their own trauma being Jews, with, you know, family in the Holocaust. So, but yeah, they're racist. And I'm pretty sure they even voted for Trump in 2016. So this just needs to be said, because like, I'm done beating around the bush, and I've seen a lot of racism at the Sudbury school that I went to. And I don't think we should hold this model as this holy thing. Like, we need to move past that. And I have seen people like Philly Free School move past that, but I just needed to get out there, because like, you know, and even my best friends, their grandchildren, they are not on good terms with them at all. So, you know, that's getting a little bit personal, but yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Ruben. And I think that I wanna just state this, because I think it's something that white people tend to, especially white progressives, which I am one. So I say nothing about white progressives that I'm not saying about myself. As an American, as a United States citizen, I am a racist. I was born in Nashville, Tennessee. I try every day to fight it and to acknowledge it, and to like, when something comes up, when a fear comes up, that I try to untangle and trace back. But it is a part of what I have been swimming in white supremacy my whole life. And if you've lived in the United States in any way, shape, or form, even in New York City, honey, we are a racist nation. And we, regardless of how much we have fought to not be, or to create systems that we thought were well-intended, are at our core. And if we can acknowledge it and like mourn it, and then begin the micro work on healing it, we're gonna be able, I think, to have more of these conversations, and to acknowledge the issues. Like, and I will say right now that I have so much work to do to heal the mistakes that I know I made as a white person founding a Sudbury model school, thinking that the model itself would take care of it, right? I mean, that is the work that I have to do. And like what we can do as a community to move forward, knowing that as we start over, because I'm going to start over soon and create something else, but I have a lot of work here to do, so that when we create that thing that's in the macro, that that we can support it when it comes up. So thank you. Brooklyn.
I wanted to share a story about like progressives and the best intentions. Last summer I took the ALC training with a group with women from my community, with the intention of starting an agile learning center, and with a flattened, non-hierarchical management structure. And that was what we had agreed on. About a month into the program, the owner decided that we were going to have required social justice offerings. And like, my kids had come from a Sudbury environment where they were allowed choice. So this felt like a break of the agreement that we had, both in the agreement that I had with the facilitator and other facilitators and the owner, and the agreements that we had made with the youth in our community. So it broke a lot of trust. And then the first offering was for November of Indigenous History Month, and there was a panel organized, and the panel was, and this was really uncomfortable for my kids because we had just moved from a reservation in Montana, and I am of mixed European and Little Shell Chippewa descent. And when we were living on the reservation, I was working at an Indigenous language development company. And in that situation, my identity was used to justify the white owners' exploitation of Indigenous culture for profit. So that's why I left that environment. And then here I'm in a self-directed environment where my trust has been broken. And then a panel is created and I'm not invited to be a part of it. And I'm thinking, well, maybe it's because, you know, I'm mixed and these other people are like enrolled tribal members, you know, they're more legit. I don't have to hold, I'm practicing a lot of not taking up too much space. Here I am taking up space, but then when the panel happened, it was like a real stereotypical group of like people who were identified with Native spirituality. Some of them weren't tribal members at all or had zero tribal heritage, but you know, were just like adopted spiritually into this group. So it was an incredibly awkward and like heartbreaking moment for me as a mixed person to be sitting in the audience of this panel. And I had so much to offer. Also just coming out of years of experience, like entrenched in Indigenous language revitalization and modern activism. And I was just dismissed. And then I'm also the parent to like a white presenting biracial child. And just the community didn't just like kind of whitewashed us. And I own my white passing privilege, but I also feel like it's necessary to like not make assumptions about people's backgrounds and experiences. And I just gotta like, that was just a real hard lesson in that. And moving forward, I'm really gonna make sure that I, you know, ask and share about identities and heritages before assuming. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Brooklyn. Can communities make policies and protocols as they're creating like foundationally to a like for that? I'm just asking this, just could that be a protocol, or do any of you have protocols in place in your communities that you've been a part of where something comes up that is very much outside of our periphery? And I'll give you an example of something we dealt with at our school. You know, one of the parts of the model, or how we interpreted the Sudbury model, was, you know, as long as you weren't messing with anybody else, you could spend your day doing what you wanted to do. And, you know, little kids got to have scissors, right? Like we had 5-year-olds that got to play with scissors. Like we didn't put the scissors up. There weren't any restrictions and rules around scissors. But we had a little 5-year-old boy who had dreadlocks, and they had been growing those locks. I'm going to say locks because I learned about the word dreadlock recently. They had locked hair, and Mama had been, the hair was from his birth, and it was an important part of their cultural identity. And one day, a bunch of the littles decided that they were going to cut each other's hair, right? And like the staff is around, but like if you're in and maybe that was our bad and so please tell me if that was like our bad as a Sudbury model to have like not been monitoring that. But I mean, we weren't monitoring it, right? And one kid cut her own hair. And then my child is mixed race, and she knows like don't mess with your own hair. Just because we talk about that at home, she was like, I don't know if I should do that. And she had the wherewithal to tell the Black boy with the locks, because her daddy has locks and she knows how important those locks are and what a huge deal they are. And she's like, I don't think you should cut those. And the mom called me later that evening, because I wasn't working at the school that day. And she was like, I just want to thank you that Elena caused, I don't know what I would have done. And so as a Sudbury school, the parents are not like, this is, you know, the child gets to choose how they want to, what they want to do. Nobody was going to be hurt. Nothing was going to happen with the hair. But you understand the layers of that. And a white person isn't coming at hair from that perspective. And there's no way we could have foreseen the laws or had conversations about what that looks like until after it happens and goes wonky, right? And parents come in, and I get that there's so many layers to it, but there is an expectation, I think, in these free spaces that white people do not think about those small things that it just doesn't affect. And it makes it can really do a lot of damage to like a family and a relationship. Yes, Amala, you have your hand raised, please.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. I just wanted to sort of say when you're done, please finish what you're saying.
No, I'm done. I want y'all to, let's talk.
Yeah, just to sort of tag off of what you were saying there, one of the things that I've realized has been hurtful for me is that I noticed that a lot of the structures that are created, and I don't know the degree to which white people are aware of it, but they're creating answers for themselves. So and they think they're creating solutions that are like universal, but that's part of the white centric nature of how, like, you know what I mean, that you think you're creating something. So yeah, so I might have more to say about this, but it's just I see it in lots of different places where, like, so one of my experiences is that I had I stopped trying to do things in a very organized way. So I tried to do things in a more organic way. So I had this community where we were focused on a specific park, and we were doing a lot of activities together, and it was very sort of like, it was coming about very organically, and it was really quite beautiful. And then an outdoor education organization that's based on the Eight Shields curriculum came along and created homeschooling programs, and it caused like a huge schism in the community that we were growing together. And the group's called Pine, but they really thought that they were creating community for homeschoolers, but there was a way in which the way the programs are built is that it's kind of like white people wanting to save white culture. And so everything outside of that is just like really invisible to them. So then it became this thing where like a lot of the people in our community joined that program. And so then it became money became the gateway to be part of the community. And also I couldn't join it because there's lots of different reasons, but there's so much invisibilization in that people who I'd been co-creating in this daily sort of beautiful, empathic way with our kids, suddenly there was this chasm where they didn't understand what pain was being created for me in the way that Pine was set up, and issues of appropriation, blah 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 blah. But just the fact that then it made it less about like our particular very like the specific connections we were having with our specific kids, and it turned into this political thing that then if I tried to critique Pine, then it was like what people were like so angry at me because they were like, well, my kid loves it and I want my kid to have outdoor like outdoor time, and so then it became like if I critiqued Pine, then I'm taking something away from their children. And they couldn't see that like actually like they were taking something away from me, because now the locus of centrality of the community was now over there and not over here, not where we were building it on our terms in this very sort of specific about us way. It was now it was like a whole bunch of informal things started being organized around this thing with Pine. So people would now, instead of us organizing and gathering together, it would be like everybody goes to Pine and then they just hang out after. So if you don't go to Pine, then you don't get to then you're not part of the hangout. Like it had so many like ripples, right? And yeah, so, but I came to really sort of understand that the reason that I felt excluded, it's not that I didn't want nature connection for my kid too, like we all do. But just that they were creating an answer for white people. And I see that in a lot of different alternative ed kind of spaces, that it's white people being like, oh my God, we need to say something about white culture. Oh my gosh, like white culture is so like authoritarian, and I don't want that for my kids. And then they create an answer, and then they go, how do we get more brown people in here? How do we get more brown people to join us, without kind of realizing that the whole genesis of the whole thing is just so centered on their own challenges and their pain and the gaps that they feel that they have, without really building like kind of relationship, which really takes time. It really takes time to build like empathic connections where you actually understand what somebody else's context is.
Thank you. In terms of adults, I know that so many SDE communities are, you know, Sudbury is the like child-centered. But one thing that I've always felt that was a little bit lost was an opportunity for the adults who we need to be deschooling, because so many issues came up, at least in our school. They wanted their kids to have it, but as soon as the thing happened, that it was fine for their kids, but they didn't like the outcome, or they didn't like the decision that had been made by the community, because they aren't a part of the community. They had so much anger and fear that they would bring in to conversations where we were trying to like, you know, we were following and doing all the things, and the kids were doing great. And then mom and dad would come in and be like, I am furious about this, because they are still so wrapped up in, they're not as far along in their deschooling as their expectation of their kids. And I feel like that's a huge thing that's missing, or at least it was in my community. But I also think that when we create these communities, so much of the work that we as parents have to do, as opposed to founders. So founders are one thing, but then the parents who are engaging in these communities have to be doing the work to like unravel themselves, so that they can look at that, and they can look at the conversation with Amala and see it, right? That's what we're missing on a massive scale. White parents creating these communities. Bria.
Just kind of building off of that, and something that came to my mind earlier, a question, and also was repeated, I think, in what Amala said, but when these communities, these SDE spaces are so built on whiteness and white supremacy, can they be shifted and changed in a major way, or do they have to fall and break down and be replaced with something anew? Like, is it so entrenched that we can't really change it without breaking it almost all the way down and starting again? And that's just like a question for everyone. I have no answer. It's just something I've been thinking about a lot.
I wanted to maybe share a story, if I just real quick, about just similar to that, and that question too, and just those, I feel like for our center, both those issues, the fact that it was, you know, in this very white town, founded by white people and white families. And so that in itself just, you know, I mean, it just is, there's just so much whiteness and unexamined, you know, and that creates harm. I mean, in so many ways. And, you know, trying to make things just financially accessible and things like that is just this tiny little piece. And there's just so much more. So there's that piece. And now we're like, you know, retroactively, like after that problematic founding, trying to change things. And just an example, just fairly recently of, and just the struggle of just the vast majority of the families not doing this work on their own. And so we, you know, at the center with the kids are having discussions and trying to do this as, you know, staff and children, and kind of trying to engage families as much as they will. But just, you know, we had like 2 young girls, one Black girl who just best friends, and then the little white girl one day just reaches out and touches her friend's hair and makes a comment about its texture. And this is the little Black girl didn't say anything, we didn't see it, but was you know, talked to her mom later. It was hurtful for her, and then of course the mom is concerned about this and shares, and you know, it's something that it's a topic we like read stories about with the kids and talked to them there, but like the families aren't doing the work, and then processing it with the white mom later and sharing, you know, here's some, you know, resources about microaggressions, talking with your kids, and just huge defensive reaction. You're saying my child is aggressive, and just and someone who identifies again as progressive, liberal, social justice oriented, but just huge feelings, huge pushback. And so it's just, I don't know, just a small story about one example of harm, and then just trying to hold this whole community, and like there's so much needed for every family to be doing this work. It's not something that like as a staff at the center, we can create a space that is, you know, free from harm and all these microaggressions. It has to be a communal effort.
Thank you. I want to be mindful. We have about 5 minutes. I want to just go and share my screen real quick, and then I want to talk to y'all about what comes next, because I feel like there's a next. I don't know about y'all, but I don't want to stop having this conversation because I feel like it's just now it's getting into like, but I'm going to share my screen really quickly, and I had posted, hold on. Here we go. This is kind of where in the work that I have been doing to like reflect on everything that happened in the community that I helped to create. And Bria, when you asked that, can SDE systems be reformed, or do they have to be like completely dismantled? I think that's like, maybe that could be our next topic, and maybe that can be something that we envision, and we talk about this like visionary futuring. So I just want to touch on it just to kind of send everybody out, because I think that this gets things going, and then maybe we could do some like reflecting and writing and thinking about that, like that question. I don't know, maybe, and if y'all have others or thoughts that you would like to continue, like to make in the next, maybe we have a series coming up, please put them in the chat. But one thing that I kind of came to an understanding, like an intuitive knowing when we closed our school, was the work that I've done personally, like this radical self-awareness work that I think is so much a part of a lot of the conversations that have been coming up in this true community. Practices like everyday micro practices on acknowledging, digging up all of it and like really facing it. And I think that's the personal work that we can all be doing. And I think that that's what's missing a lot of times when we talk about families, like you talked about the mom that was immediately defensive. My kid is, no, that's not that. My kid isn't trying to be mean or isn't trying to do things to her hair. The fact that we can't even, and a lot of times the defense just comes up, and parents in these communities, our defenses just come up. We can be working on that on our own. I really believe that as is the micro, so is the macro. So that personal radical self-awareness work. And then if you have not been or connected to the ancestral healing work that is happening in this community, I think that is part of that radical self-awareness work. They work hand in hand. and that the ownership, the taking ownership as a progressive white person, that it's there, and every day we just need to be like digging it out, unrooting it from ourselves. And that's our personal work to do. But I'm a storyteller, and in our conversations around this topic over in the topic section, this idea of feral futuring came up. And it reminded me of Adrienne Brown and her idea of visionary fiction, and how you write what you reimagine and you write what you want these communities to be. And so maybe we can be practicing that. And I will post in this some links to feral futuring and visionary futuring, and this idea of this reimagining. Because Bria, in answer to your question, I believe that it all needs to be burned to the ground. I mean, I think the traditional school system needs to be burned to the ground and rebuilt. And unfortunately, I feel like the SDE communities, because so much of it was founded at a time when it was predominantly white, progressive people that had really good well-meaning, I don't think it works anymore. Like, I think that in the same way that, in 1968, a lot of white people were like, we won, and they've done and they still are like thinking, but this is like there is fluidity in this. And sometimes fluidity means that a rampage washes it all away. And then we have to build foundationally back up. And maybe that's where we are. And I know that sounds super into days, but I kind of am. So this is what where can we go from here? And so I offer you in this end of this session, let's put this visionary future into practice with a foundational understanding that we will look white supremacy in the eye when it presents itself, because it will all the time, and ignoring it will just undermine our intentions. So let's future by facing the biggest fear we have as a collective. And I think that as white people, the biggest fear, as progressive white people, the biggest fear we have, that's why we get defensive, is I'm not racist. Oh, I'm not racist. I'm not. I promise I'm not. And if we can just own it and then foundationally start building stuff, honoring that we are, and that we want to do better, and that we don't want to just do better, we want to actually like face it and then create systems that we all are going to connect to. I think that if we can continue those conversations from that perspective, I don't know, if that's something that you're interested in, let me know. And if you want to be like, yes, here in the comments, then we can begin the process of maybe setting up another conversation in the next, couple of weeks, or definitely, I know holidays get crazy, but so it is 2:31. Unless somebody has something that they want to get in, please, but if not, I thank y'all for this beginning, and I think we have so much more to talk about. Yeah, cool. All right. Bye, y'all. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Cheers.